They say that only the good die young, but that's not entirely true. This story is proof. This is the story of a brilliant young engineer who died before his time. He was talented, ambitious, and kind. His death shook his town. He was murdered in his own home, and the police are still looking for his killer. On the morning of November 22, 2021, the residents of Pickerington, Ohio, woke up to the chilling news that Daniel Moore, one of their most successful young businessmen, was found dead in his own home. It was a quiet residential street, lined with neatly mowed lawns and cozy homes. The last place anyone would expect a murder to happen. Daniel Moore was 32 years old, a self-made millionaire. He owned a software company that specialized in engineering projects for Fortune 500 clients. According to those who knew him, he was passionate about his work, dedicated to his craft, and a generous friend. That fateful morning, it was Daniel's wife, Whitney, who discovered the body. She had gone to check on him after he failed to show up for breakfast, and his phone went straight to voicemail. When she walked into the kitchen, she saw a terrifying scene. Blood everywhere, splattered across the walls and floor. And there in the middle, slumped over the kitchen counter, was Daniel's lifeless form. The police were called, and they arrived to a horrific sight. Daniel had suffered multiple stab wounds to the chest. He had clearly put up a fight, but whoever had attacked him had been relentless. As the news of Daniel's death spread through the tight-knit community, shockwaves rippled through the neighborhood. Friends and colleagues struggled to come to terms with the senseless loss. Everyone wanted answers. But what was disturbing was that this quiet suburban street was not unfamiliar to crime. There had been a series of unsolved murders in the area recently, all of which had baffled the police. Residents were beginning to fear that they might never find out who was responsible for Daniel's death. The police were quick to start their investigation. They searched the crime scene, questioned neighbors, and scoured through Daniel's background looking for any possible motives or enemies. The pressure was on to catch the killer and bring them to justice. But as they dug deeper into Daniel's life, they realized that this case was more complicated than it seemed. As the investigation deepened, the police uncovered an unexpected twist. They had a suspect. Michael Harris, a 34-year-old auto mechanic who lived in a nearby town. But why would a random mechanic have anything to do with the death of a successful businessman? It turns out, there was more to Michael than met the eye. He had a history of violence and had been arrested several times for assault and weapons charges. Additionally, he had a personal connection to Daniel Moore. He had approached Daniel for a loan to buy equipment for his garage, but Daniel had refused. Could this seemingly insignificant interaction have driven Michael to murder? Or was there something more sinister at play? Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the police decided to make an arrest. After a 48-hour investigation, they took Michael Harris into custody, charging him with the murder of Daniel Moore. The news of the arrest sent shockwaves through the community. People were relieved that someone was finally being held accountable for Daniel's death. But there were still many questions. How did the police connect Michael Harris to the crime scene? What evidence did they have to support the charge? And what was the motive behind the brutal attack? To the public, the case looked open and shut. Michael Harris had motive, opportunity, and hard forensic evidence against him. The police claimed to have found Michael's fingerprints on the murder weapon, a knife covered in Daniel's blood. Furthermore, a neighbor had testified to seeing Michael leaving Daniel's house around the time of the murder. With such strong evidence, it seemed as though Michael's guilt was beyond doubt. The prosecutors were confident they could prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They presented their case to the grand jury, and an indictment was handed down. The trial was set. In the courtroom, the prosecution painted a grim picture. They told a story of a heated argument between two men, a tale of betrayal and revenge. According to their narrative, Michael Harris, desperate for money, had approached Daniel Moore for a loan. When Daniel refused, Michael, consumed by rage, had confronted him, leading to a violent struggle. The prosecution claimed that during the struggle, Michael had grabbed a knife and stabbed Daniel repeatedly. fueled by anger and the desire for revenge. They argued that this motive was strong enough to drive Michael to commit the heinous crime. But as the trial progressed, cracks began to appear in the prosecution's seemingly airtight case. During cross-examination, defense attorney Rebecca Collins challenged the prosecution's star witness, the neighbor who claimed to have seen Michael leaving Daniel's house. Rebecca pointed out a crucial inconsistency in his testimony. If Michael had committed the murder, as the prosecution alleged, then he would have been at the crime scene for approximately 45 minutes, assuming the murder took place around 10:30 p.m. However, the medical examiner had estimated Daniel's time of death to be 9:45 p.m. This discrepancy raised serious doubts about the witness's account of events. Had he really seen Michael leaving Daniel's house at the time of the murder, or was he mistaken? Determined to expose the truth, Rebecca delved deeper into the evidence. She noticed another puzzling detail. The window to Daniel's house had been shattered, but not from the outside, as one might expect in a murder investigation. Upon closer examination, it became apparent that the glass had been broken from the inside. This finding suggested that the break-in theory was flawed. If the window was broken from the inside, it meant that whoever killed Daniel had been inside his house at the time of the murder. This revelation shook the courtroom to its core. The implications were profound. If the killer was inside the house, then the entire narrative of the prosecution crumbled. The supposed motive of a botched robbery or burglary no longer held up. Rebecca wasted no time in presenting this new forensic evidence to the jury. She skillfully dismantled the prosecution's case, exposing the flaws and inconsistencies that cast doubt on every aspect of their narrative. The jury listened intently, their faces betraying their growing confusion. Rebecca's closing argument was masterful. She painted a picture of a carefully constructed deception, a plot designed to mislead and deceive. Her voice echoed in the silent courtroom as she accused a certain individual of orchestrating the murder and framing Michael Harris. "This case isn't about a mechanic who lost his temper," she said firmly. "It's about a deliberate attempt to deceive this court. The true killer has been sitting right here day after day, testifying as a witness." All eyes turned to the witness stand. Gasps filled the courtroom. Officers moved in to detain him. It was James Miller, the seemingly helpful neighbor who had claimed to have seen Michael Harris leaving Daniel's house. His face drained of color as the handcuffs were placed on him. The room buzzed with whispers and murmurs as the truth of the situation dawned on everyone. James Miller, under intense questioning, finally confessed. He admitted to staging the break-in, planting the false evidence, and providing misleading testimony to the police. The motive, according to James, was financial. He and Daniel had been business partners, but Daniel had concealed debts and shady deals that threatened to ruin the partnership. Fearing exposure and financial ruin, James acted out of desperation, taking Daniel's life and framing Michael Harris to protect himself. A reopened investigation confirmed James's guilt. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The real murder weapon was found hidden in James's house, along with other evidence that linked him to the crime. The community was shocked. The man they had trusted, the man they had believed was a victim, was revealed to be the perpetrator. In the end, justice prevailed. James Miller was charged and convicted of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Michael Harris, who had endured months of imprisonment based on false accusations, was released and exonerated. He received a settlement from the state for his wrongful conviction and began the long process of rebuilding his life. Daniel Moore's family and friends were relieved to know the truth. They had fought tirelessly for justice for Daniel, and their efforts paid off. The case of Daniel Moore is a tragic reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. It is a testament to the lengths to which desperation and greed can drive a person, and the importance of seeking the truth, no matter how painful it may be. As the community of Pickerington, Ohio moves forward, they carry with them the memory of Daniel Moore, a young man whose life was cut short, but whose spirit lives on in the pursuit of justice.